A poor girl got into the millionaire CEO's car, thinking it was an Uber and won his heart. Before watching the video, please leave a like to support our channel. It was the kind of rainy morning that made the world feel a little heavier. Grace Stone stood on the cracked pavement of a quiet downtown corner, clutching a broken umbrella that fluttered helplessly against the wind like a tattered moth. Her coat was thin, her shoes soaked, and her phone, her lifeline, had just flickered to black, the battery drained with one last gasp. She was late, not fashionably late, not 5 minutes behind schedule late. No, this was the kind of late that made your stomach twist into knots and your job prospects dissolve into thin air. With trembling fingers, she had requested a ride on the app before her phone died, praying that somehow, somewhere, her Uber would find her. But now, with nothing but hope and humidity to lean on, she scanned the street looking for a miracle. That's when it happened. A sleek black car rolled to a stop right in front of her at the red light. The same make and model she'd chosen on the app, down to the polished rims and tinted windows. Fate? Coincidence? Or just blind desperation? She didn't wait to find out. With one hand clutching her rebellious umbrella and the other pulling the car door open, she dove in, water dripping from her coat onto the immaculate leather interior. Finally, she gasped, pushing back wet strands of hair from her forehead. I thought I was going to drown out there. Please, go, go, go. I'm late, and I swear if I don't make it to the Stone Bridge orientation, I'll be fired before they even spell my name right. The man behind the wheel turned to her slowly. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his face calm but unreadable. Gray eyes, sharp as silver, silent, still. Grace didn't even pause to wonder why her driver looked like he stepped off the cover of Forbes magazine. Don't even explain, she said quickly, waving her hand. Traffic's a mess, GPS is a joke, and my morning's been cursed since my toast landed butter side down. Just go straight and turn right after the French cafe. You know, the one that charges $9 for a croissant? I had one yesterday, still chewing on the guilt. She didn't notice the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, or the way he glanced at her like she'd just landed from another planet. She was too busy rambling, too drenched to care, too frazzled to notice that she had just given directions to the CEO of the company she was about to work for. And he didn't say a word. He simply pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic like this sort of madness happened to him every day. The ride to Stonebridge Corporation was quiet, at least on his part. Grace, soaked and stressed, filled the silence with a symphony of nervous chatter. She talked about her burned tongue from bad coffee, mismatched socks featuring penguins and tacos, and the existential crisis that came with paying $9 for a croissant. She didn't notice the subtle smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. She missed the way his hands gripped the steering wheel, not out of irritation, but out of restraint. Because the more she talked, the more intrigued he became. She was real, raw, unfiltered, and completely unaware of the situation she was in. When the building came into view, she leaned forward, brushing the fog from the window with her sleeve. Can you drop me off at the side entrance? Less chance of anyone seeing the drowned rat I've become. He obliged without a word, parking with effortless precision. You're a lifesaver, she said, pushing open the door. 5 stars. No, 10. If I could tip you, I would, but my wallet is also soaking wet. She jumped out and turned to give a final wave, but he was already staring straight ahead, like none of it had happened. Grace didn't think twice. She ran into the building, water squishing in her shoes, the nerves bubbling back into her stomach. This was her chance, a new life. All she had to do was survive her first day. As she slipped into the elevator, heart racing, she thought, this day can't get any more awkward, but life has a funny way of proving us wrong. When she reached the floor for orientation, her coworker Rachel whispered frantically, you almost missed the new CEO's welcome speech. New CEO, Grace panted. You mean the ice-cold executive with no sense of humor? That one? Exactly. He's already in the conference room. The entire group was ushered inside. Grace took a seat in the back, still trying to tame her rain-slicked hair. She barely noticed the hush that fell over the room as the door opened. Footsteps. Calm, commanding. And then him. Grace's heart slammed into her ribs. Same tailored suit, same storm gray eyes, same man who had driven her through the city in silence, while she complained about overpriced pastries and showed off her taco socks. He stepped to the front of the room with practiced ease, scanning the faces until he found hers. Her mouth fell open. Her folder dropped to the floor with a soft thud. "This," the coordinator said with a proud smile, "is Mr. Thomas Miller, our new CEO." Grace didn't blink, couldn't. He was looking at her, not with judgment, but with something worse: amusement. "I hope my arrival didn't catch anyone off guard," he said smoothly, lips curving into a smile that only she recognized. There was a silence so heavy it seemed to press on her shoulders. "Especially those," he added, "who might have mistaken me for their Uber driver." Laughter erupted from the back of the room. Heads turned. All eyes landed on Grace, who looked like she wanted to melt into the carpet. Thomas, her Uber driver, gave the slightest nod, a quiet acknowledgement, a warning, and a promise. For the rest of the meeting, Grace Stone sat perfectly still. Or at least she tried to, but her thoughts were anything but still. They ran in every direction like startled birds, fluttering, tripping, flapping. The CEO, her CEO. The man she'd accidentally commandeered like a flustered cab passenger in a romantic comedy gone off script. And now here he was, standing in front of the entire team, looking every bit the polished executive, while she sat in soggy shoes, wearing socks that didn't match and a shirt missing a button. Grace didn't dare look up again. When the meeting ended, she bolted toward the door, hoping to blend into the wall, or maybe the potted plant beside it. No such luck. "Miss Stone," came a voice, calm, unmistakable, and dangerously close. She turned slowly, face flushed, stomach in knots. "Yes, sir." Thomas Miller took a step forward, stopping just close enough for the conversation to be private, but not unnoticed. "I hope your ride this morning was pleasant," he said with a straight face. Grace tried to smile, but it came out more like a pained grimace. "Very pleasant, sir. One of the most luxurious Ubers I've ever taken." He raised an eyebrow. "Good to hear, although some drivers deserve more than 5 stars. Maybe even a promotion." There was a glint in his eye, a sparkle of humor beneath the steel. Grace nearly choked on her own breath. "Oh, that won't be necessary. I mean, he was great, sure, but I doubt he's looking for a career change." Thomas leaned in just slightly, voice lower. "We'll talk later, Miss Stone. I have ideas." And just like that, he walked away, leaving Grace standing in the hallway like a character from a soap opera who just discovered her identical twin was also her boss. Back at her desk, her coworker Rachel grinned from ear to ear. "What was that?" Grace collapsed into her chair. "I'm either getting fired or promoted or added to an internal company newsletter titled 'Employees Who Embarrass Themselves' in front of the CEO." Rachel handed her a muffin like a peace offering. "If you get fired, we'll start a bakery together. You'll name the muffins after your most embarrassing moments. This one can be Penguin Sock Crumble." Grace buried her face in her hands, laughing and groaning all at once. But deep down, in a place she rarely visited, she knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. Thomas Miller didn't seem like a man who let things go easily, and she had just become the most unexpected twist in his perfectly structured world. The next morning, Grace arrived at work early, too early. Her coffee tasted like regret, her eyes were still puffy from overthinking, and her inbox greeted her with a chilling sight. From Thomas Miller. Subject: facilities audit. Personal oversight required. Priority: immediate. Grace blinked, then blinked again. Facilities audit? Personal oversight? She scrolled down and read the body of the email. "Miss Stone, we're expecting a group of investors this Friday. Please oversee a walkthrough of the 10th floor. Check the lighting, restrooms, coffee machines, carpet condition, and any other sensory threats to investor optimism. Your perspective is unique." TM, Sumnuha. "Unique," Grace muttered, slumping in her chair. "Is that code for 'I trust you' or 'I enjoy watching you suffer'?" Rachel peeked over the divider with a knowing look. "Sounds like a test." "It's punishment." "It's attention," Rachel corrected. "Corporate-style flirting," Grace groaned. "I should have just kept my mouth shut and stayed off fancy leather car seats." Still a few hours later, Grace found herself on the 10th floor with 2 maintenance workers, a flashlight, a notepad, and a growing list of issues that included flickering lights, a printer that wheezed like a dying llama, and a mysterious hallway that smelled like expired cologne. "This is starting to feel like a reality show," she muttered, scribbling down. "Room 10B, replace bulb. Also, find source of weird smell. Suspect. Haunted briefcase?" That's when she heard the footsteps. Polished, measured, familiar. She looked up, and of course, there he was, Thomas Miller, in another perfectly tailored suit, watching her crouch beside a vending machine while wearing a paint-stained blouse and static clung hair. "Need assistance?" he asked dryly. "I need a time machine," she replied, "and a hazmat suit for that coffee machine on the 9th floor." He stepped closer. "I have to say, your approach to chaos is refreshingly honest." Grace stood, dusting herself off. "I call it dramatic efficiency." He smiled, a real one, not just the polite executive kind. "You're doing better than expected." Wait, was that a compliment? Still deciding. And just like that, Yant, he walked away again, leaving Grace standing there, feeling oddly proud, and also like she might faint. Back at her desk later that afternoon, she found a sleek envelope with her name on it. Inside was a note, handwritten in perfect cursive. "Miss Stone, since you seem to have survived the printer war, I have another mission. A copy of last year's financial report has gone missing from the shared folder. I'd like you to review the version attached and highlight any inconsistencies. I trust your instincts." Rachel hovered behind her. "The financial report? That's intense. Like being handed the nuclear codes and asked to double-check the math." Grace sighed. "I think he's trying to kill me with spreadsheets." But as she dove into the task, flagging errors, correcting graphs, laughing at a suspicious line item labeled "chocolate budget, confidential," something strange happened. She found herself enjoying it, not because of the numbers, but because somewhere in between the formulas and formatting was the feeling that someone actually believed in her. The next day, the office buzzed louder than usual. There was a strange energy in the air, part excitement, part suspicion, and part that classic office cocktail, caffeine mixed with corporate gossip. Grace had barely sat down when Rachel rushed over, her phone waving in the air like a victory flag. "Grace, you are on the internet." Grace blinked. "What?" Rachel shoved the phone in her face. A video was playing. There she was, standing in front of a company banner, smiling nervously, talking animatedly. "About what?" "Oh no." "Thomas Miller is intense," her voice echoed from the tiny screen. "But he's also got this secret sense of humor. The kind that hits you 5 minutes later and makes you question your entire life." The camera cut to her laughing, her hands waving like they had lives of their own. Grace felt her soul leave her body. "Please tell me that was edited, or fake, or an AI-generated version of me." "Nope," Rachel said, grinning. "It's real. It's everywhere. They're calling you the CEO whisperer in the comments." Grace watched in horror as her own face winked back at her. "I'm going to get fired. Live. In HD." But before she could spiral any deeper, the phone on her desk rang. Rachel answered. Pause. Covered the receiver. "It's him." Grace's heart plummeted into her shoes. She walked to Thomas's office like she was headed to the guillotine. The door creaked as she stepped inside. He was at his desk, watching the same video. Paused right at the moment she'd said he needed more coffee than a cafe and more reports than an audit. "Mr. Miller, I swear I didn't know." Thomas looked up. "You said I'm mysterious, that I intimidate people, that I drink too much coffee." Grace flinched. "All technically true?" There was a long pause, then he sighed, a slow, almost amused sound. "It's a hit." She blinked. "What?" "That video has been viewed over 30,000 times since this morning. HR just sent me a message with the subject line, 'We need more Grace Stone.'" Grace collapsed into the chair across from him. "So, I'm not fired?" "On the contrary," he said, leaning back. "Marketing wants you in a few internal videos. They think you're relatable, human. You're what this company needs." She stared at him. "I was just trying not to cry on camera. And yet you made people laugh." He stood up, walked around the desk, and stopped in front of her. You're a surprise, Grace, he said softly. The kind that sneaks in, knocks over the furniture, and suddenly makes the room feel more like home. She didn't know what to say, so she smiled. Does this mean I get a raise? He smirked. Let's start with a croissant. That afternoon, as Grace sat back at her desk with a pastry and 100 notifications buzzing her inbox, she realized something. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was seen. Not just by Rachel, not just by the HR team, but by him. Thomas Miller, the man who rarely smiled, the man who now seemed to reserve his smallest, rarest ones just for her. Grace had survived many things at Diamond Enterprises. Misunderstood memos, malfunctioning printers, even a surprise appearance on the company's homepage. But nothing could have prepared her for the moment she walked into Thomas Miller's office that afternoon and heard the words, "I'd like you to accompany me to a dinner with our investors." She blinked. Twice. Then, with the most professional voice she could muster, replied, "I'm sorry, sir. Did you mean it as in, with you?" Thomas was typing something on his tablet, casual as ever. You know the departments. You know how to adapt in unpredictable situations. And most importantly, you're the only person in this building who can keep Miss Delaney from trying to slow dance with me again. Grace coughed. I'm sorry. What? He finally looked up, his gray eyes glinting with quiet mischief. It's a long story. Let's just say I need a buffer, a distraction, someone who's not afraid to spill imaginary juice on my suit if the situation calls for it. Grace folded her arms. So, you want me to be your corporate decoy? He smiled. I prefer the term strategic companion. She narrowed her eyes. This feels suspiciously like a rom-com plot. And yet you're perfect for it. She sighed. Fine, but I'm wearing heels that say I mean business. And maybe something, and he added, that says I'm not entirely predictable either. That evening, Grace stood in front of her closet like a woman about to face a jury. Black dress, too formal. Burgundy, too bold. Pantsuit, too much HR professional about to file a complaint. In the end, she settled on something simple, elegant, and just mysterious enough to make a man like Thomas Miller stop and look twice. At exactly 7:58 p.m., she arrived at the restaurant, a place so refined the waiters moved like ballet dancers and the walls smelled like money and French oak. Thomas was already waiting, dark gray suit, open collar, no tie, and for once, not a tablet in sight. You're early, she said as he pulled out her chair. I'm always early. Early, he replied, but I never wait, except for you. Her breath caught, just for a second. Dinner began smoothly. Soft jazz floated through the air. The wine was poured with silent precision. The conversation was safe. Market forecasts, new partnerships, mildly offensive jokes from aging investors. And then she arrived. Miss Delaney. Red dress, bright smile, the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Thomas, she purred, placing her manicured hands on his shoulder. You didn't tell me you were bringing a guest. Thomas stood politely. Grace Stone, my assistant for internal integration. She's helping us humanize our next phase. Delaney's eyes narrowed. How progressive. Grace extended her hand. We've been working together since the $9 croissant. Thomas choked on his water. Delaney blinked. Excuse me? Thomas cleared his throat. Inside joke. Grace just smiled sweetly. Delicious and financially irresponsible. Like most decisions around here. The rest of the evening was a tug-of-war of smiles and strategy. Every time Delaney leaned in, Grace made an excuse. Every time Thomas looked like he might bolt, she swooped in with a fake emergency. Your tie's crooked. The kitchen manager says there's a fire drill. Someone spilled juice on your budget projections. By dessert, Delaney was defeated. And Thomas? He was smiling, really smiling. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Thomas walked her to her car in silence. Not uncomfortable silence, but the kind that wrapped around them like a soft blanket. You were brilliant, he said finally. Quick, calm, unpredictable. I specialize in chaos, she replied. Also, I deserve hazard pay. He chuckled. Noted. They stood for a moment, just looking at each other. The lights from the restaurant flickered behind them, casting a soft glow on his face. Thank you, Grace, he said quietly. for being exactly what I didn't know I needed. And before she could say anything, he added, with that sly glint in his eye, "You look dangerous tonight." She smiled. "And you almost looked human." He laughed, a real full laugh that reached his eyes. "Good night, Miss Stone." "Good night, Mr. Miller." And as she stepped into her car, heart fluttering, she realized she hadn't just survived the evening, she'd stolen the show. Monday came wrapped in that familiar corporate gray, coffee-fueled morning chatter, printers groaning under the weight of meaningless reports, and elevators that always seemed to stop at every floor except yours. But for Grace Stone, something was different. She walked through the doors of Diamond Enterprises no longer just the girl who got in the wrong car. Now she was the girl in the red dress. The one who walked into a strategic investor dinner and walked out with the CEO's undivided attention. Rachel was waiting by the coffee machine, grinning like someone who knew exactly what happened and couldn't wait to say, "I told you so." "Well, well, well," she sang, handing Grace a mug. "How was dinner with Mr. Mysterious?" Grace took the coffee and sipped. Strategic, professional, complicated. "Did you spill imaginary juice on him?" "No, but I may have mentioned the $9 croissant again." Rachel laughed. "It's your legacy now, right up there with viral videos and rogue plant stands." Grace rolled her eyes, but she couldn't hide the quiet glow on her face. The truth was, she felt different, lighter, seen, and maybe just a little dangerous. That afternoon, a company-wide email hit inboxes like a small explosion. Subject: Annual Company Gala. Mandatory attendance. Location: Hilton Grand Ballroom. Dress code: formal. Special highlight, partnered dance tradition. Grace stared at the screen. "No," she whispered. Rachel appeared behind her. "Yes. No. Yes." "I don't dance," Grace muttered, already regretting every decision that led her here. "You danced just fine at that investor dinner," Rachel teased. "Besides, rumor has it the CEO always leads the first waltz." Grace nearly spilled her coffee. Friday arrived like a slow drumbeat. The ballroom was everything Grace feared. Golden chandeliers, classical music, colleagues in suits that cost more than her rent. But amid all the extravagance, she spotted him. Thomas, across the room, dressed in navy and silver, the picture of elegance and authority, until he saw her and smiled. Not the professional smile, not the PR-approved one, but hers. He walked toward her slowly, deliberately, as if the whole room didn't exist. When he reached her, he didn't speak right away. He simply looked at her like she was the only honest thing in the building. "You came," he said. "You made it mandatory," she replied. He chuckled softly. "I was hoping you'd break the rules just this once." She smiled. "And miss the chance to witness corporate waltzing in the wild?" He extended a hand. "Dance with me." Grace hesitated, but then she placed her hand in his. The music began. They stepped onto the dance floor, movements unsure at first, like two strangers remembering how to speak. But then, rhythm found them. Or maybe they found each other. Around them, lights shimmered. Colleagues whispered. But Grace didn't care. She was dancing with the man who once barely spoke a word, the man who remembered her mismatched socks, the man who trusted her with everything that mattered, not just in business, but in quiet, unspoken moments. As the song came into a close, Thomas leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Grace, you've been the most unexpected thing in my life." She looked up, heart pounding, and somehow he added, "the most essential." And then, he let go of her hand. But not the connection in his eyes. The Monday after the gala arrived, not with music and glimmer, but with silence. A thick, uncomfortable kind of silence. Grace walked into the office expecting something. A glance, a nod, a quiet continuation of whatever it was that had started between them on that dance floor. But instead, Thomas Miller walked past her desk with the same precision he gave every hallway. Eyes forward, spine straight, mouth a thin line. "Morning," he said, like she was just another employee, not the woman he'd pulled close under a crystal chandelier 2 nights ago. Not the girl he'd looked at like she was the answer to a question he didn't know he'd been asking. Grace sat down slowly, fingers frozen on the keyboard. Rachel was already watching. He's avoiding you, she said. I know. Why? I don't know. But deep inside, Grace did know, or at least she feared she did, because people like Thomas, people built from control, calculation, and cool logic, they didn't do vulnerability. They didn't do risk. And feelings? Feelings were the ultimate glitch in their system. The days dragged on like cold coffee. Emails from Thomas came in, but now they were stripped of personality. Attach files by end of week. Confirm update on Project Delta. No inside jokes, no handwritten notes, no secret sarcasm tucked between the lines. It was like he'd deleted her from his emotional hard drive. Grace replied with the same formality. But it hurt, more than she expected, more than she wanted to admit. By Thursday, the ache had settled into something heavier. Resignation. Maybe she'd misread everything. Maybe that night was just a moment, a flicker, a scene that didn't belong in the movie of his life. She told herself to move on. She told herself she didn't care. But that night, when she got home and opened her bag to take out a folder, she found an envelope. Black, heavy paper, her name written in pen, not typed, not printed, handwritten. Her breath caught. She opened it. Inside was a single sheet, his handwriting. Grace, if I seem distant, it's because I'm trying to protect what's left of my rationality. I've built my world on predictability, on systems, on control. You disrupted all of that. You made me laugh on days that didn't deserve it. You reminded me that this office isn't full of machines, it's full of humans. And you made me feel something I hadn't felt in years, fear, the good kind. The kind that comes when you realize you have something to lose. But Grace, you deserve more than a man who hides behind reports and spreadsheets. You deserve someone who knows how to show up. I'm trying, and if you're still willing to meet me somewhere in the middle, not as your boss, but as a man who is slowly learning how to be human again, I'll be waiting. T. Grace sat there in the quiet of her apartment, the words echoing inside her like a soft thunder. She didn't cry, but she did something rarer. She believed him. Grace didn't sleep much that night, not because she was hurt, though she was. Not because she was angry, though a small part of her still flared, but because she cared. And caring about someone who once looked at the world through a microscope, only to suddenly see you through it, that's not a thing you walk away from lightly. So the next morning she got up early, pressed her skirt, brushed her hair, and wore the penguin socks. Because if she was going to face Thomas Miller, she was going to do it with honesty and a little irony. At 7:52 a.m., she entered the quiet building, and there he was, alone, waiting in the small garden courtyard on the 7th floor, the one no one used except for when the Wi-Fi went out or someone needed to cry in private. Thomas stood beside a small table with 2 coffees, both still steaming, as if he wasn't sure she'd come, but had hoped just hard enough. Grace stepped forward slowly. He turned, and the look on his face said everything she needed to hear before he even opened his mouth. Relief, fear, and that quiet, almost boyish hope. You came, he said, voice softer than she'd ever heard it. I brought socks, she replied, lifting her pant leg just a little. It seemed appropriate. He smiled, a real one, the kind you can't fake even if you're a CEO. They sat, and for a moment neither spoke. Just 2 people in the stillness of early morning, with more words between them than silence could hold. Then Grace, always the brave one, broke it first. I was ready to move on, she said. I told myself you were just retreating, that you regretted letting me in. I did retreat, Thomas said quietly, but not because I regretted it. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. I've spent years hiding behind structure. I know how to manage people, money, risk, but I never learned how to manage this. Grace looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she didn't see the CEO. She saw the man, tired, honest, trying. You don't need to manage it, she said gently. You just need to show up. I'm here now. She nodded. So am I. He reached across the table, slowly, like asking permission with his fingers, and took her hand. His palm was warm, a little nervous, completely real. I can't promise I won't mess it up, he said. I can't promise I won't make fun of you when you do. He chuckled. I'd expect nothing less. They sat like that, fingers entwined, hearts finally catching up with everything their eyes had been saying for weeks. And somewhere between the steam rising from the cups and the breath they both didn't know they were holding, Grace smiled. Thomas did too. And that was enough. The announcement came on a Tuesday, not a Friday like everyone expected, not wrapped in suspense or gossip or mystery, just a calendar alert in everyone's inbox. Subject: Internal Appreciation Dinner, Friday 7 p.m. Location: Main Conference Hall. Dress code: smart casual. Note: surprise recognition segment. Attendance encouraged. Grace didn't think much of it at first. These things happened every quarter. Someone in accounting got a framed certificate. Someone in operations got a fruit basket, and then everyone went home with a branded notebook and half a sandwich. But this time felt different. For one, Thomas had been acting lighter, still composed, still sharp, but not so walled off. And when Grace had walked past his office that morning, he had looked up, caught her eye, and winked. Winked, like a man with a secret he couldn't wait to share. By 6:55 p.m., the conference hall buzzed with voices, paper cups, and whispers. Grace sat near the back with Rachel, wearing a navy blouse and just enough confidence to hide how fast her heart was beating. What do you think this is about? She asked, more to herself than anyone. Rachel leaned in, whispering, if you end up on that stage and he proposes using a PowerPoint slide, I swear to everything holy I will faint. Don't even joke, Grace began, but the lights dimmed. A spotlight fell on the stage, and then, with the effortless calm of someone who used to terrify interns just by walking past them, Thomas Miller stepped into the light. Applause, brief, respectful. He didn't gesture for silence. He just looked out at them and spoke. Good evening. Normally, I'd use this moment to review quarterly wins, cite metrics, and thank our finance team for keeping us out of prison. But tonight, I want to do something different. I want to talk about a mistake. One that started with a black car, a red light, and a woman yelling, go, go, oh, like she was in the spy movie. Laughter rippled across the room, but only one person froze. Grace, her heart, stopped. Thomas continued, she got into my car thinking it was an Uber. She gave me directions. She talked about $9 croissants and mismatched socks, and she didn't realize that in that 10-minute ride, she unraveled something I didn't know was tangled. The room had gone still. No emails, no scrolling, just breaths. That day, she wasn't afraid to speak. She wasn't afraid to look ridiculous. And because of that, she reminded me what it means to be human. We spend so much of our time pretending, in suits, in meetings, behind polished smiles. But the truth is, the best ideas, the best breakthroughs, the best connections come when we stop pretending. So tonight, I'd like to recognize someone not for their years of service, not for record-breaking numbers, but for reminding us, or at least me, that courage often looks like a girl in wet socks, giving orders to a stranger with a serious face. He paused, looked directly at her. Grace Stone, please come up here. The applause was louder now, not polite, real. Rachel pushed her forward. Go, unless you want me to drag you by the elbow. Grace's legs felt like paper straws, but somehow she moved. Up the aisle, onto the stage, and then she was standing next to him. Again, like that night on the dance floor. He turned to her, didn't hold a mic, didn't need to. Just looked at her like the room had melted away, and it was just the two of them. You didn't just get into the wrong car, Grace. You crashed into the right life. Mine. And if the entire company knows it now, I'm okay with that. Because for the first time, I'm not leading with strategy or logic. I'm leading with honesty. And you are the best mistake I've ever made. When the room exploded into applause. But Grace, she didn't hear it. She just smiled, soft and full and tear-glossed, leaned in, whispered back, and you are the best Uber driver I've ever had. Thomas laughed, the kind of laugh that echoed, And in that moment, every wall he had ever built crumbled, brick by brick, not from pressure, but from trust. The conference room slowly emptied. People returned to their desks, still whispering, still smiling. Some shook their heads in disbelief. The CEO, Thomas Miller, had just declared something more powerful than a quarterly report: his heart. But Grace, she wasn't thinking about how the others reacted. She was still holding the moment, the weight of his words, the honesty in his eyes, the way the spotlight didn't make her want to run this time. When Thomas caught up to her outside the hall, he didn't say anything at first. He simply held the door open, then nodded toward the elevator. "Come with me?" She didn't ask where. She didn't need to. Minutes later, they stepped out onto the rooftop. The sun had dipped low behind the buildings, painting the sky in streaks of amber and faded lavender. The breeze was soft. The city below hummed its usual tune: horns, footsteps, laughter in the distance. Grace turned to him. "So, public declarations now?" Thomas rubbed the back of his neck, a rare flicker of nerves on his usually unreadable face. "Too much?" She smiled gently. "Just enough." Silence settled between them. Not awkward, not tense, just full, like the air before it rains. He looked out over the skyline. "I've led teams, bought companies, fired people without blinking. But standing up there, saying what I said to you, was the bravest thing I've ever done." Grace stepped closer. "You've always been brave, just not in ways you let yourself feel." He turned to her. "You really believe that?" She nodded. "I've watched you walk through storms without flinching. But I think for the first time you let yourself get wet." A small smile curved his lips. "That's poetic." "I've been working on it," she said. "It comes with the socks." He chuckled, then grew quiet again. Then, almost like a confession, "I was afraid of what this would mean. For the company, for my control, for my reputation." She tilted her head. "And now?" "I'm still afraid," he admitted. "But I'm more afraid of losing you." Well, there it was. No suits, no spreadsheets, just a man, with his heart in his hands. Grace looked up at him, her eyes soft but steady. "You're not going to lose me, Thomas," she whispered. "You already found me." He exhaled, a breath held for far too long. "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy," she replied. "It's worth it. That's better." A few droplets fell from the sky, just enough to remind them that they were, after all, still under the open world. Thomas looked up. "Rain." Grace laughed. "Of course, it started with rain. Why not again?" He took off his blazer, gently draped it over her shoulders, and for the first time pulled her close. No hesitation, no audience. Just them. "You look beautiful in the rain," he said softly. "You look human," she whispered back. And under that soft rooftop drizzle, between heartbeats and city lights, Thomas kissed her. No pressure, no rush. Just the simple, extraordinary kiss of two people who had finally stopped running and started choosing. There was no grand announcement, no email blast, no change in relationship status posted on the company intranet. But by the following Monday, everyone knew. Not because Thomas and Grace walked hand in hand into the office, not because they kissed in the elevator or sent flirty gifts through Slack, but because Thomas Miller, the man who once moved through the office like a silent storm, now smiled when he passed the reception desk, because he stopped at Grace's desk every morning just to say good morning, not update me, not where's the file, just good morning. Rachel naturally noticed first. "You're glowing," she said one afternoon, leaning over the divider with a mischievous grin, like someone who hasn't cried into a spreadsheet in at least 3 days. Grace smirked. "Don't jinx it." "So, what's it like?" Rachel asked. "Dating the mysterious CEO?" Grace thought about it for a second. "It's like discovering your favorite mug has cracks, but you love it even more for holding together anyway." Rachel blinked. "Okay, that's poetic and oddly specific." That first week was full of quiet moments, simple things, like Thomas waiting for Grace to finish her lunch so they could walk back to the office together, like him bringing her tea instead of coffee on the day she had a sore throat. It's terrible but effective, he said, mimicking her words from months ago or when they argued about cereal brands in the grocery store. And he said, I've closed multi-million-dollar deals, but apparently I can't win a debate about whether Frosted Flakes are acceptable past age 12. Grace just laughed and tossed them in the cart. But of course, it wasn't all soft smiles and cereal jokes. There were awkward moments too, like when HR sent a friendly reminder about company policy and office relationships. Thomas had read it aloud in his usual dry tone. Please avoid public displays of affection that may cause discomfort to colleagues. Then he added, glancing at Grace, good thing we haven't kissed near the printer. Yet. She had thrown a pen at him. It hit his shoulder. He grinned for 3 hours after. Still, for all the quiet joys, there were things neither of them said aloud. Not yet. Like the fact that Grace still wondered if she was just a phase in his life, a chapter that would close when the next merger came along. And Thomas, he still worried he'd mess it up. That one day Grace would wake up and realize he wasn't enough, that he was more system than soul. But on Friday, as they stood on the office balcony watching the sun dip behind the city, Thomas turned to her and said, out of nowhere, do you know what the first thing was that made me want to keep talking to you? Grace shook her head. It was the socks. She laughed. Seriously? He nodded. Penguins and tacos. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You were just being you. And you weren't judging me. I was relieved, he said, because for the first time in years, I saw someone who wasn't afraid to be messy. And it made me realize I was exhausted pretending I wasn't. Grace leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. I like this version of you, she whispered. So do I, he said, because you helped me find him. Thomas didn't bring it up for a while, not because he didn't want to, but because some introductions carry more weight than names and handshakes. Some people are doorways into the parts of us we've hidden the longest. And for Thomas, that person was his mother. Eleanor Miller, a former professor of literature, sharp as frost, elegant as a cold January morning, and utterly impossible to impress. It was a Sunday morning when he finally said it, not in some romantic moment, not over candlelight or soft music, but in the kitchen while Grace was sipping tea in one of his oversized sweaters, hair still messy from sleep. He cleared his throat and said, would you have lunch with my mother? Grace looked up, blinking. Your mother? He nodded. No explanation, no sales pitch, just a quiet hope behind his steady gaze. And Grace, who had faced elevators, boardrooms, and his silence, nodded. Okay, when? The drive was quiet. Thomas held the wheel like he did everything else, with focus, with care, with a hint of tension underneath. Are you nervous? Grace asked gently. He didn't answer right away. Then, she's particular. Grace smiled. So am I. He glanced sideways at her, the corners of his mouth twitching. That's what I'm afraid of. Eleanor Miller lived in a classic brick house lined with ivy and stone, the kind that looked like it belonged in a novel with long pauses and unsaid things. She opened the door herself, chin high, eyes sharp, a string of pearls around her neck. She didn't hug Thomas. She simply said, you're late, and then turned to Grace. You must be the girl who told my son that $9 croissants are financial terrorism. Grace froze. Then Eleanor smiled, faint but real. I read the article. It was ridiculous, but honest. I liked it. Lunch was quiet at first. The dining room was filled with polished wood, books stacked in corners, and silence so dense you could stir it with a spoon. Eleanor asked questions, short, surgical. Where did you study? What do you plan to do after this temporary position? Do you like jazz? Thomas sat stiffly, watching every word. Grace, on the other hand, answered with grace, no pun intended, with warmth, with just enough humor to soften the tablecloth. And somewhere between the second course and the lemon tart, something shifted. Eleanor leaned back, her tone changed. He never brought anyone here before, not even for holidays. Grace blinked. Why not? Eleanor looked at her son. Thomas lowered his gaze. She sighed. Because I raised him to protect himself, and he listened. Too well. After lunch, while Thomas walked to the car to grab a small gift he had brought, Grace stayed behind with Eleanor for a moment. The older woman poured another cup of tea, then without looking up, said, "Don't break him." Grace was quiet for a beat, then softly, "I think he's the one fixing me." Eleanor finally met her eyes. For the first time, her gaze wasn't testing. It was curious, almost warm. "Then perhaps," she said, "you're exactly what he needed." Later, as they drove home, Thomas asked, "So, are you traumatized?" Grace laughed. "No, she liked me." He looked at her, surprised. "She said that?" "No, but she didn't try to poison my tea. That's progress, right?" He chuckled, the sound full and boyish. "She's complicated." Grace reached over and took his hand. "So are you. And yet, you stayed." She smiled. "I always stay for tea, especially when it's strong." The morning began like any other. Coffee, light banter, a stolen kiss in the elevator when they thought no one was watching. Spoiler, Rachel was watching and nearly dropped her bagel. But by noon, the entire company buzzed with a different kind of energy. Hushed tones, nervous glances, phones lighting up too often. Grace was in the break room when she heard it. Two assistants whispering near the vending machine. "Did you see the press leak? They're targeting Miller, saying the last merger was manipulated. And there's a whistleblower, anonymous." The air left her lungs. Within minutes, Rachel came running into her office. "Grace, he's in the boardroom. Emergency meeting. Legal's here. And it's serious." She didn't wait. She made her way to the boardroom, heart pounding, knees barely holding her up. Through the frosted glass, she saw him. Thomas, standing, pale, jaw clenched, but not broken. Not yet. Their eyes met through the glass, and even in that split second, he looked at her the way someone does when the whole world is burning, and all they want is one hand to hold. By the end of the day, headlines were everywhere. Diamond Enterprises faces investigation over previous merger. Insider leaks put CEO Thomas Miller under scrutiny. Is this the fall of the Ice King? Grace shut her laptop. Her hands were shaking. Because behind every bold headline was a truth she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just a scandal. It was his life's work. Everything he had built, protected, controlled, now unraveling. And her heart broke. Not just because he might lose his position, but because she knew him well enough to understand. It was never about the company. It was about what it represented: safety, order, worthiness. That night, she found him in his apartment, sitting on the floor, back against the couch, tie loose, sleeves rolled up. No wine, no music, no shield, just him, and silence. Grace stepped inside, slowly. He didn't look up. She sat beside him and waited. Then he whispered, "They'll take everything, Grace." Her voice didn't waver. "Then we'll start over." He shook his head. "You don't understand. If this goes to court, if they find something, even if I didn't do it, it doesn't matter. They'll drag my name, bury my credibility. I'll lose my seat, the company, my reputation." She looked at him, unwavering. "Thomas, I didn't fall in love with your seat at the table. I fell in love with the man who gave me a ride when I was soaking wet, wearing taco socks, and still told the truth even when it scared him. You think they can take that away from you?" He turned to her slowly. His eyes were glassy but not broken. She reached up, touched his cheek. "Even if you lose everything, I'll still be here. You're not what you have, Thomas. You're what you choose. And you chose me." He exhaled, a sound caught somewhere between a soem and a breath of relief. "Grace, I'm scared." "I am too," she whispered. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." That night, they didn't talk about strategies or statements or court dates. They just held each other. And somewhere between the silence and the storm, Thomas realized he'd built an empire out of numbers and walls. But Grace? Grace was the only thing that had ever made him feel like a man, not a machine. The press conference was set for Thursday morning, and in the days leading up to it, Diamond Enterprises had turned into a battlefield of flashing cameras, legal statements, and nonstop no comments. Thomas spent his hours between lawyers, boardrooms, and calls with crisis consultants who threw around words like mitigation, optics, in narrative control. But Grace, she never left his side. Sometimes silently beside him while he rewrote press notes. Sometimes gently rubbing his shoulders at 2 a.m. when he refused to sleep. And sometimes just holding his hand in the dark, saying nothing, because nothing was the only thing that didn't feel like performance. Wednesday night, the eve of the press storm, Grace found him standing on the rooftop of the office building, the same one where they first kissed in the rain, the same one where he'd said, "You are the best mistake I've ever made." This time, he wasn't wearing a suit, just a sweater, loafers, no armor. He looked like a man, a tired one, a real one. She joined him at the edge, the wind brushing her hair across her face. "You don't have to say anything," she said softly. "I know," he replied, "but I want to." He paused, then turned to her, and for the first time in days, smiled. "You've seen me at my worst. You've seen what the world looks like when it turns on me, and still you stayed." "I wasn't going anywhere," she said. He took a step closer. "I've had power, prestige, everything people are supposed to want." He exhaled, voice low. "But the thing that changed me was a woman who got into the wrong car and ended up driving straight into my heart." Grace's breath hitched. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small square box. Her heart stopped. He opened it. Simple, elegant, no flash, just honest. And then he asked quietly, like a secret only the stars above should hear, "Grace Stone, will you marry me?" There was no one there to film it. No press, no board, no public. Just them. And the city lights like blessings behind them. Grace blinked, teary, laughing through her shock. "Are you sure you want to propose during a corporate crisis?" "I'm sure," he said, "because if I lose everything tomorrow, I need to know I didn't waste today." She stepped forward, placed her hands on his chest. Her voice was steady, full of love. "Then yes, Thomas Miller, I will marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. Not because it was sized perfectly, but because it had been meant for her. Long before either of them understood what fate had been planning. They stood there for a long time after that, not talking, not rushing, just breathing the same air. And for once, Thomas wasn't planning the next step. He was simply living the moment. 9 o'clock a.m. The press room was packed. Journalists, investors, board members, employees, every seat taken, every camera pointed at the podium bearing the silver diamond logo of Diamond Enterprises. But Grace sat quietly in the front row, not as a temporary assistant, not as the quirky viral video star, but as the fiancée of the man about to face the world. Thomas entered without fanfare. No entourage, no legal team flanking him, no carefully choreographed entrance. Just him, in a suit without a tie, his expression calm, his steps steady. He walked up to the mic, took a deep breath, and spoke. "Good morning. I'll keep this short and honest." Reporters adjusted their lenses. Phones lit up, ready to live stream every syllable. This past week, Diamond Enterprises and myself have been at the center of questions surrounding a previous merger. I want to say clearly, I did not participate in or authorize any fraudulent activity. Whispers swept across the room. He continued, unwavering. "But I'm not just here to deny something. I'm here to tell you who I am." And then his eyes found her. Grace, her hands clasped, her heart racing. For most of my life, I was a machine in a suit. I believed perfection meant protection. That if I never let people close, I'd never lose anything. Then one rainy morning, a woman got into my car by mistake, thinking it was an Uber. She was chaotic, soaked, and completely unapologetic about her penguin and taco socks. Laughter erupted. Grace blushed. Thomas smiled. "She didn't just make me laugh, she made me feel. She reminded me I was human, and she changed me." In the middle of the storm, she stayed. She stood by me when headlines screamed louder than truth. His voice dropped slightly, full of emotion. "So I want to say something personal today. I asked her to marry me, and she said yes." The room gasped. Camera shutters fired like fireworks. He turned slightly to look at Grace, no longer speaking to the room. only to her. If anyone doubts my integrity, look at the woman I love. Because in a world of deals and data, she's the one thing that made me real. Silence. Then, applause. Louder than any press release. More powerful than any PR plan. But Thomas didn't flinch. He stepped down from the podium, walked straight to Grace and reached for her hand. No words, just truth. And a man, not a CEO, choosing love in front of the world. The wedding wasn't held in a grand ballroom. There were no ice sculptures, no fireworks, no black tie orchestra. Thomas Miller didn't want legacy. Grace Stone didn't want perfection. They both wanted real. So they chose the rooftop, the very same rooftop where they had kissed in the rain, where he had broken down, where she had said yes. Rachel cried before the ceremony even began. "Don't look at me," she whispered, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. "I'm not emotionally stable enough for this." Grace stood near the elevator in a simple ivory dress that floated around her ankles like wind. Her hair was loosely tied, soft tendrils curling around her cheeks. No veil, no tiara, just her. She held a tiny bouquet of tulips, the kind Thomas once said were the most awkwardly honest flower. And waiting at the far end of the rooftop under strings of glowing lights was Thomas. In a slate blue suit, clean cut, but with his tie ever so slightly askew, because Grace had knotted it with nervous hands. He didn't fix it. He wanted her to be part of him that day, even in the way his collar didn't sit quite right. The guests were few, just close friends, a few colleagues. His mother Eleanor seated in the front row in pearls and subtle pride. The ceremony was brief, heartfelt, and when it came time for vows, they didn't read from paper. They just spoke. Thomas went first. "I spent most of my life trying not to feel, because feelings were unpredictable, chaotic, and then you showed up. You got in my car without permission, without apology, and you brought chaos with you." He smiled softly. "But you were the best kind of chaos. You made me feel again. You made me risk again. And you made me want things I never let myself want. So today I vow to never go back to silence, to always choose you this day, even when the road is messy, even when I don't have GPS. I vow to be the man who still reaches for your hand when the traffic lights turn red. And when things get dark, I vow to be the driver who never lets go." Grace's eyes glistened, her hands trembling. She cleared her throat and began. "I never expected love to arrive in a luxury car with a CEO in the driver's seat. I wasn't looking for it. I was just trying not to get fired." Laughter sparkled through the guests. "But then you looked at me, and even when I was soaking wet, talking about overpriced croissants and panicking about my job, you didn't flinch. You listened. You never promised perfection, but you gave me something better. Consistency, kindness, growth. So I promise to be your balance when you spiral. You're loud when you're quiet, your soft place to land when the world turns sharp. And if we ever get lost again, I promise not to check the map right away. I'll just sit beside you, hold your hand, and enjoy the ride." They kissed as the city lights blinked awake behind them. No confetti cannons, no choreographed fireworks. Just real love, real laughter, and a rooftop full of heartbeats that finally found their rhythm. 2 months later, a woman named Linda stepped into a black car outside her apartment. It was pouring rain. She opened the door, flustered. "Finally! I thought you were my Uber." The man in the driver's seat blinked. "I'm not an Uber." Linda froze. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." But the man only smiled. "That's okay. You never know. You might have just gotten in the right car by mistake." And somewhere far above the city, on a rooftop bathed in string lights and memories, Thomas and Grace would have smiled, because they knew the best stories don't start with a plan. They start with a mistake that turns out to be fate, or maybe just the beginning. Sometimes life doesn't come with a perfect plan. Sometimes it comes with a wrong turn or a wrong car. But maybe, just maybe, those unexpected moments are the ones that lead us to where we truly belong. Thomas spent years building walls, hiding behind success and silence. Grace? She walked in with mismatched socks, a tired umbrella, and a heart full of honesty. And together they reminded us that real love isn't always polished. It's not always planned. It's about showing up, holding on, and choosing each other, even when the world gets loud. What about you? Have you ever taken a wrong turn that led to something wonderful? Share your story in the comments. We read every single one. Grace and Thomas would love to hear from you. If their story touched your heart, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps support these characters and lets us know you want more love like this. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you'll never miss another beautiful, emotional story like this one. Until next time, remember you're never too old for a new beginning, and sometimes the wrong car can lead you to the right forever.